So GONG just had a week. Gartner releases their first ever Magic Quadrant for something called Revenue Action Orchestration, which, by the way, is a phrase that didn't exist 6 months ago. And GONG is sitting in the top right corner like they own the place, which, I mean, they kind of do. Highest in ability to execute, furthest in completeness of vision. Number one across all 4 use cases. It's the kind of analyst report that makes competitors update their LinkedIn profiles, if you know what I mean. Now, here's where this is interesting to me specifically. A few weeks ago, I did a full positioning analysis on GONG, pulled it apart, ran my tests, looked at what they claim versus what customers actually say versus what the structural decisions reveal. Published the whole thing, called it How GONG Owns Certainty While Selling Intelligence. And I made some predictions about what they actually own, about where they're headed, about the gap between the story Amit tells and the position they accidentally built. So when this Gartner news drops, when Amit posts his victory lap on LinkedIn, I'm sitting here like, let me check my notes. Let me see what the market just validated and what it missed. Let me compare what I saw from the outside with no inside access, no conversations with the team, just public information and too much time on my hands. No wife, no girlfriend, no kids. Against what the industry's most expensive analysts just concluded. Because that's the test, right? If positioning analysis is real, if this methodology actually works, then the predictions should hold up when external reality shows up. And external reality just showed up in the form of a magic quadrant and a founder who thinks he knows what he built. So let's see how the notes compare. And Amit, founder CEO, the guy who built this thing, he posts on LinkedIn, "We dreamed this category, we built it, and we're leading it." Which is true. He did. They did. 300 million in recurring revenue, $7.2 billion in valuation, 75% market share, 5 Fortune 10 companies, an NPS score higher than the iPhone had at launch, which is the kind of stat that makes you go, wait, really? And then you check it and yeah, really. But here's where it gets interesting for me personally. And I spend way too much time on this stuff. I'll admit that up front. I read customer reviews the way some people read celebrity gossip. I go on Reddit threads about sales tools at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, which is either dedication or a cry for help. Jury's still out. And when you actually listen to what GONG customers say, not the testimonials on the website, those are curated. Those are the highlight reel. I mean, the unprompted stuff, the Reddit comments, the G2 reviews, where someone's clearly procrastinating on their actual job to write 4 paragraphs about software. They don't say revenue intelligence. They don't say conversation analytics. They don't say AI-powered insights. They say things like, I couldn't do my job properly without it. They say it's my compass. They say it ends the he said, she said debates. One guy, and I should have screenshot this because it was so fucking perfect. One guy wrote, GONG gives me confidence that we will succeed. Confidence, not data, not analytics, confidence. That's a completely different business than the one GONG thinks they're in. And that gap between what a company says they are and what their customers actually experience, that gap tells you everything. So I do this thing. I call it the remove all words test, which sounds fancy, but it's really just me being annoying about marketing copy. The idea is Simple. Strip away all the messaging, all the taglines, all the positioning PowerPoint decks that some consultant charged you $200,000 for to create. Remove all those words. What's left? What structural decisions remain? Because here's what I've learned doing this for way too long. Companies reveal what they actually are through their costly commitments. The things that are expensive to do and painful to reverse. The things they sacrifice, not the things they claim, the things they prove. And when you run this test on Gong, something weird happens. Something that I don't think Amit fully sees, which is not criticism. You can't read your own label from inside the jar. That's just how it works. But from out here, from the cheap seats, stick with me here. The pattern is clear. Let's start with the origin story, because origin stories are never just stories. They're founding traumas dressed up as business opportunities. Amit was CEO of Sisense before Gong, business intelligence company, doing fine, whatever. And then he has what he calls his quarter from hell. Revenue falls off a cliff. Leadership is scrambling. They're looking at CRM data. They're listening to recorded calls. They're doing everything you're supposed to do when the numbers go sideways and nothing. Crickets. They can't figure out what's happening. The data exists, but it doesn't tell them anything. The calls are recorded, but nobody has time to listen to all of them. There's this black hole between we have customers and we understand our customers, and they're falling into it. Now, most founders would describe this experience as, I saw an opportunity in conversation analytics, or I realized the market needed better data. Famous last words. That's not what Amit says. And I'm paraphrasing here, working in the dark. He says they were making decisions by guesswork rather than facts. That's not the language of someone who spotted a market opportunity. That's the language of someone who experienced genuine terror. The kind of terror where you're responsible for hundreds of employees and millions of dollars, and you cannot be certain what is happening in your own business. That's not a data problem. That's an existential crisis. And existential crisis makes the best founding mythologies because they're true. They're not manufactured. You can feel the residue of that fear in everything Gong builds. Second costly signal, the customers they chose to ignore. Gong started by selling to sales operations teams, which makes total sense on paper. Sales ops are the people who care about conversation data. They're the ones running the tech stack. They're the obvious buyer. Except sales ops teams don't have budget. They don't have executive mandate. They're not the ones who wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if they're going to hit the number and whether their career survives if they don't. So Gong pivoted. They went up market to CROs, chief revenue officers, the people who own the number, the people whose entire professional identity is wrapped up in a quarterly target that may or may not hit. And here's the thing. Pivoting your entire go-to-market isn't a tactical organization. It's an identity decision. You're choosing who you serve. You're choosing whose problem you solve. You're choosing whose anxiety you relieve. Gong chose to serve the people who need certainty the most desperately. The people for whom uncertainty isn't just uncomfortable, it's career threatening. That's not an accident. That's the position revealing itself. Third costly signal. And this one's fun. The pricing. Gong charges somewhere between $1,300 and $1,600 per user per year, plus a platform fee that ranges from $5,000 to $50,000, depending on how much you're deploying. Now, if you're a mid-market company with a 20-person sales team, you look at that and you think, that's a lot of money for a call recording software. And you're right, it is, if that's what you think you're buying. But if you're running a 500-person revenue organization, 500 reps having thousands of customer conversations, creating thousands of competing narratives about what's happening in your pipeline, you look at that pricing and you think, obviously we need this. Because you're not buying software at that point, you're buying certainty infrastructure. You're buying the elimination of doubt at scale. And what's the ROI on not having a nervous breakdown during board meetings? What's the ROI on actually knowing whether you're going to hit the number? It's infinite. The price becomes trivial. The pricing doesn't just filter for budget, it filters for identity. It filters for, I'm the kind of leader who needs certainty to operate, versus I'm comfortable with ambiguity. And Gong very deliberately chose the former. Fourth signal, the operating principle. Every company has values. Most of them are garbage. Integrity, excellence, customer-centric, words that mean nothing because they cost nothing to claim. On the other hand, Gong has this thing they call no sugar. It means directness, unvarnished truth. Don't soften the blow. Don't hedge. Don't say, we might have an issue. When the issue is obvious, just say it. And here's why that matters. If you're in the business of eliminating uncertainty for customers, you cannot have a culture that creates uncertainty internally. You can't have meetings where people dance around the truth. You can't have a company where political survival requires strategic ambiguity. No sugar isn't a cute value. It's the cultural expression of the certainty position. The inside has to match the outside or the whole thing falls apart. Fifth signal, the category creation timing. October 2019, Gong abandons conversation intelligence and creates revenue intelligence. Most analysts would tell you that's about expanding the addressable market, broader positioning, bigger TAM, investor story, blah, 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 blah. But that's not what actually happened. Conversation intelligence gives you certainty about what was said. That's useful. That's valuable. But it's tactical. It's limited. It's certainty about one small dimension of the problem. Revenue intelligence gives you certainty about what it means for revenue. That's strategic. That's comprehensive. That's certainty about the outcome that actually matters to the person signing the check. They didn't broaden the market. They elevated the certainty from partial to complete, from we can tell you what your rep said to we can tell you whether you're going to hit your number. That's a completely different promise. That's a completely different identity transformation for the customer. Sixth signal, the data moat. Gong has analyzed over 300 million customer conversations. 300 million. That's not a number you throw around casually. Someone actually counted, or at least some algorithm did, which is close enough. And most people would look at that and say, oh, they have a data advantage. Competitors can't catch up, which is true, but it's also missing the point. Because every conversation captured makes the AI more certain. Every pattern recognized makes predictions more certain. Every new customer who joins adds to the certainty of the whole system. The moat isn't data. The moat is certainty compounding over time. And certainty compounds the weight nothing else does. Because once you've operated with certainty, going back to uncertainty feels like professional negligence. Seventh signal, and I love this one, the candor about limitations. Amit gives interviews where he says things like, AI cannot yet be trusted for tasks requiring full accountability. He admits what the technology can't do. He sets expectations. Now, why would a CEO selling an AI product go around telling people what AI can't do? Isn't that anti-LinkedIn advice? No, it's certainty brand management. When you admit uncertainty in some areas, you reinforce that you can be trusted about certainty in others. You're saying we'll only give you certainty where we can actually deliver it. We won't create false certainty. That's not humility. That's strategic. It builds the credibility that makes the certainty claim land. Okay, so what does all of this add up to? 7 costly signals, all pointing to the same thing. And it's not conversation intelligence, and it's not revenue intelligence. Those are product categories. Those describe what the software does. They're nouns you'd find in a Gartner report, which I know. They just got a Gartner report. We'll get to that. What Gong actually owns is certainty, not the word, not the tagline, certainly not a marketing claim. In fact, they've never explicitly claimed it, which is part of why it works. But the psychological state of being sure, of being confident, of knowing rather than guessing. And here's why that matters so much for their customers. Revenue leadership is existentially uncertain. It's a job defined by not knowing. Will we hit the number? Is this deal real, or is this rep bullshitting me? Is our strategy working, or are we just getting lucky? Should I fire this person, or should I give them another quarter? Every day is a high stakes bet. Being wrong can end careers. The uncertainty isn't just uncomfortable, it's professionally lethal. And Gong provides one thing that can be certain: what actually happened. You can't be certain about the future. You can't be certain that deals will close, but you can be certain about what your rep said, how the customer responded, which objections came up, which messages resonated. Reality is the mechanism. Certainty is the actual product. Go back to that customer language now. Listen again. Gong gives me confidence that we will succeed. That's certainty about outcomes. I couldn't do my job properly without it. That's certainty as a professional requirement, not a nice to have, a need to have. Ends the he said, she said debates. That's certainty eliminating competing versions of truth. There's no more argument about what happened because Gong shows you what happened. My compass. That's certainty as navigation in an uncertain terrain. And notice what's absent? Nobody says great analytics. Nobody says useful dashboards. Nobody says helpful AI assistant. Nobody. They use words about confidence, necessity, truth, navigation. They're describing how they feel, not what the software does. That's how you know the position is real. It shows up in unprompted language. It shows up when people aren't trying to sound smart. It shows up on a Reddit at 11 p.m. But here's the problem. And there's always a problem. Otherwise, this would be a TED Talk, and I'd be wearing a headset, microphone, and walking across a stage instead of sitting here. Certainty has a ceiling. The certainty position makes Gong essential for the anxiety, for the 3 a.m. Will we hit the number terror? It's an incredible wedge. It's got them to 300 million ARR and 75% market share. But what happens when certainty becomes table stakes? What happens when every serious sales tool offers call recording and AI analysis and reality capture? What happens when knowing what happened isn't enough anymore? When customers need to know what to do next? This is what I call the graduation problem. Customers start by needing certainty about reality. Then they graduate. They want certainty about action. And you can see Gong making the escape attempt. It's not subtle. The new framing is a revenue AI operating system, not a tool, not a platform, an operating system like iOS, like the thing everything else runs on. They launched Gong Orchestrate with 18 specialized AI agents. 18! Each one designed not just to tell you what happened, but to tell you what to do next. And now this week, the Gartner Magic Quadrant isn't for revenue intelligence anymore. It's for revenue action orchestration. RAO. RAO. A category that literally didn't exist until Gong needed it to exist. They're trying to move from certainty about reality to certainty about what to do. From the diagnostic to prescription. From intelligence to orchestration. Amit's LinkedIn post says it explicitly. Turn reality into insight and insight into action. That's the tell. That's the direction. That's what they're actually building toward, which is different from what they own, which is different from what they claim. So now there's a three-way tension. And three-way tensions are where the interesting stuff happens. What Gong owns, certainty about reality. Earned through 7 years of costly signals and 300 million conversations. What Gong claims? Revenue intelligence. The category they created and named. What Gong is building? Action orchestration. The future they're betting on. 3 different businesses, 3 different identities, 3 different customer transformations. And here's the thing. That tension isn't a problem to solve. It's a choice to make. You can't be all 3. Not really. Not in the mind of your customer. Positions are singular or they're nothing. And one more thing, and this matters. Explicit claims weaken. The moment you say we give you certainty, you trigger skepticism. The brain has defenses against claims. People have been lied to too many times by too many products that promise confidence and deliver dashboards. The strongest positions are never stated. They're demonstrated. They're proven through pattern of decisions after decisions after decisions. Volvo doesn't say we own safety. They prove it through crash tests and engineering choices and the kind of boxy design that screams, we care more about protecting you than looking cool. You feel it. You don't need to be told. Tesla doesn't declare, we own the future. They prove it by making gas cars feel like antiques the moment you drive one. Gong's reality platform branding works precisely because it describes the mechanism, not the outcome. It says, we capture what actually happened and let your brain make the inference about certainty. Self-generated conclusions beat stated claims every time. So here's what I'd tell Amit if he were listening, which he's probably not because he's busy winning Gartner quadrants and running a $1 billion company. But hypothetically, let's say you're listening to this, Amit, stop claiming revenue intelligence. It's a category. Categories get crowded, positions get defended. Stop defending the conversation intelligence origin story. You've outgrown it. The certainty position transcends the mechanism that created it. And for the orchestration move, which is clearly where you're headed and clearly what you're building, don't claim it. Don't say we tell you what to do. Prove it. Make the gap between using Gong and not using Gong so wide that operating without it feels like guessing. And for revenue leaders, guessing is career suicide. But you already probably knew that. The certainty position got you here. The question is what certainty becomes when it starts telling people what to do next. That's a different product. That's a different promise. That's a different transformation. Amit, you posted this week. We dreamed this category, we built it, and we're leading it. You're right. You did dream the category, revenue intelligence, and now revenue action orchestration. You name those games. You set those rules. You're winning on those terms. But here's the thing about categories. They're games. Positions are what you own in people's minds. And no one can read their own label from inside the jar. From out here in this seat, the label is clear. You didn't just dream a category, you accidentally built a monopoly on the psychological state that revenue leaders need most: certainty in a world designed to deny the many. That's not a feature set. That's not a product category. That's inevitability. And now you're building something else: certainty that tells you what to do, not just certainty about what happened, which is bigger, which is scarier, which could be the whole game if you prove it instead of claiming it. 75% market share matches the 76% the category kings typically capture. That's not coincidence. That's the math of owning a concept instead of competing on features. You own certainty. The only question left is whether you'll own it on purpose.